Have you ever been told by your own flesh and blood that your existence is a losing investment? My parents threw those exact words at me right before gifting my perfect sister a $500,000 villa. I did not scream or beg. I simply packed up my dignity and walked away. Stick around, because you will want to hear exactly how I turned my worthless status into a brutal financial execution that leveled their arrogant empire. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Maya Revenge Stories. Unfortunately, YouTube has completely demonetized our channel, leaving us with absolutely no budget to keep operating. If you enjoy today's story, please consider supporting us with just $1 so we can pay our hardworking team, help them cover their living expenses, and continue bringing these stories to you. You can support us by scanning the QR code on your screen or by clicking the donation link in the description or the pinned comment below. Thank you so much for listening. My name is Ruth Lynch. My story begins on a suffocatingly humid evening at one of the most exclusive steakhouses in downtown Seattle. The air inside the private dining room was thick with the scent of dry-aged Wagyu beef, roasted truffles, and vintage Cabernet that cost more than my monthly rent. The ambient amber lighting reflected off the elaborate crystal chandeliers, casting a warm, elegant glow over a table that felt colder to me than the freezing rain outside. Across from me sat my parents, Arthur and Eleanor, their faces glowing with a sickeningly sweet pride that was entirely reserved for the person sitting next to me. That person was my younger sister, Chloe. She was the undisputed golden child of the family, perfectly manicured, draped in designer silk, and newly engaged to a man who looked like he had just stepped off the cover of a financial magazine. Tonight was supposed to be a celebratory dinner for her engagement. Halfway through the main course, Arthur raised his heavy crystal glass, tapping it gently with his silver fork to command our attention. He smiled, a genuine, radiant expression I had not seen directed at me in over a decade. "To our beautiful Chloe," he began, his voice booming with arrogant authority. "Your mother and I wanted to ensure you and your new husband start your lives on the absolute right foot. That is why we have just closed on a $500,000 villa in the most prestigious suburb of the city. Consider it our early wedding gift to you." Chloe squealed with delight, clasping her hands together as Eleanor handed her a sleek velvet box. Inside rested a gleaming set of keys. The table immediately erupted into joyful laughter and the clinking of expensive wine glasses. I sat there, perfectly still, staring at my untouched water glass. The contrast between her reality and mine was physically nauseating. While Chloe was being handed a $500,000 future on a silver platter, I was actively drowning. 6 months prior, a horrific car accident had left me hospitalized and saddled with crushing medical debt, even after insurance paid their meager portion. I was on the hook for a mountain of hospital bills. I was currently working 70 hours a week between two soul-crushing jobs just to keep my head above water. I was sleeping in a cramped, drafty apartment where the heating barely worked, exhausted to the very marrow of my bones. Seeing the keys to a $500,000 estate sliding across the pristine white tablecloth broke something fundamental inside me. I swallowed the massive lump of pride in my throat, cleared my voice, and spoke up. "Mom." "Dad," I started, my voice trembling slightly despite my best efforts. "I am really happy for Chloe. I truly am. But I am struggling right now. The hospital bills from the accident are burying me alive. If you could just help me with $15,000, even just as a temporary loan, it would give me enough breathing room to get back on my feet." The joyful laughter died instantly. The silence that followed was deafening, heavy enough to crush my chest cavity. Arthur slowly lowered his glass. His warm, fatherly eyes morphed into cold, calculating slits. He picked up his silver steak knife, tapped it deliberately against the table, and leaned forward, looking at me like I was a beggar off the street. "Chloe is the future of this family," he stated, his tone completely devoid of any parental warmth or empathy. "You are a failure. Investing in you is throwing money out the window. In this family, you are completely worthless." I looked over at my mother, desperately hoping for a single flicker of sympathy, but Eleanor simply took a delicate sip of her wine and purposefully looked away. I turned to my sister. Chloe did not offer a single word of defense. Instead, she let out a quiet, mocking smirk, her manicured fingers slowly and deliberately stroking the new keys to her villa. My heart pounded furiously in my ears, but I did not cry, I did not scream, and I did not argue. The sheer, unadulterated cruelty of that single moment burned away every last lingering shred of attachment I had to the people sitting across from me. I quietly picked up my linen napkin and placed it neatly on the table. I pulled exactly $47.50 from my worn wallet, placing the cash carefully next to my plate to cover my specific portion of the meal. Without saying another word, I stood up, walked out the heavy oak doors of the restaurant, and stepped out into the freezing Seattle night, leaving my family behind forever. The morning after that dinner, I took out my phone, removed the SIM card, and snapped it in half. I canceled my lease, packed whatever fit into my battered sedan, and moved to a tiny windowless studio on the opposite side of the city. I did not leave a forwarding address. I simply evaporated from the Lynch family narrative. With my personal life completely erased, I threw myself entirely into the corporate meat grinder. I secured a junior analyst position at Meridian Frost Capital. To the average person walking down the street, the name meant absolutely nothing. But in the cutthroat, shadowy world of corporate finance, they were legendary. Meridian Frost specialized in purchasing distressed assets, foreclosures, and toxic debt at pennies on the dollar, only to squeeze the original borrowers for every last cent. It was a brutal, soul-crushing environment, but it was exactly what I needed. I used the burning anger from that restaurant as fuel to rebuild myself from the ground up. Empathy was a liability in this business, so I systematically killed it. I taught myself to look at human tragedy, a bankruptcy, a lost home, a ruined business, and see nothing but numbers on a balance sheet. I spent my nights reading through thousands of pages of obscure legal codes and tax regulations. I learned how to surgically dissect the most convoluted financial portfolios, hunting for the tiny, hidden cash flows that desperate debtors tried to conceal. I became an expert at finding the cracks in their legal armor. I was clocking 90 hours a week, sleeping under my desk, and surviving on stale coffee and pure, unadulterated spite. While I was busy turning myself into a financial predator, my former family was busy pretending they were royalty. I kept a single, anonymous burner account on social media, checking it perhaps once a month just to keep tabs on them. The contrast was almost comical. Chloe's feed was a never-ending highlight reel of her new $500,000 reality. There were endless photos of her sipping champagne by her new infinity pool, unboxing imported Italian furniture for the villa, and posing in front of her manicured gardens. Arthur and Eleanor were right there with her, throwing lavish, catered networking parties on the estate grounds. They were using Chloe's home to aggressively climb the Seattle social ladder, projecting an image of untouchable, old money wealth. Watching them flaunt the very resources they denied me for my survival did not make me sad anymore. It simply made me focus harder. Exactly 2 years passed. 24 months of relentless, grinding hustle transformed me from a drowning victim into the apex predator of my firm. I shattered every acquisition record Meridian Frost Capital had ever set. My superiors stopped seeing me as a junior analyst and started treating me as their most lethal weapon. I was handed the most complex, high-stakes portfolios because they knew I would extract maximum value without a single shred of hesitation. Because of my performance, my compensation skyrocketed. I was pulling in massive bonuses and commission checks, but you would never know it by looking at me. I maintained a fiercely independent, closed-off existence. I upgraded to a slightly larger apartment with decent heating, but I kept it completely bare. I owned 3 tailored suits and drove an unassuming black sedan. I was not interested in buying flashy cars or designer clothes. Every single dollar I earned was immediately weaponized and pushed into high-yield investments. My bank account was growing at an exponential rate. But being the top earner at Meridian Frost was never the end goal. It was merely the training ground. Using the massive capital I had quietly stockpiled over those 2 years, I hired a brilliant corporate lawyer bound by strict confidentiality agreements. Together, we established a private, anonymous investment fund. We layered the corporate structure with proxy directors and shell entities so thick that my name was completely untraceable. I named it Ironclad Holdings, LLC. It sat there in the dark, a massive vault of liquid cash, fully loaded and ready to strike. I was not planning to hunt random bad debt anymore. Ironclad was created for one specific, devastating purpose. I was sharpening my knives, waiting in the shadows for a very specific piece of prey to finally bleed in the water. It was a dreary Friday afternoon, and the chaotic trading floor of Meridian Frost Capital was finally emptying out for the weekend. I was just about to shut down my terminal when a secure digital courier dropped a massive, encrypted file into my inbox. A struggling regional bank, severely over-leveraged and teetering on the absolute edge of total collapse, was quietly liquidating a portfolio of toxic debt. They needed an immediate cash injection to survive the upcoming regulatory audits and were practically giving away their non-performing loans. I cracked my knuckles, poured my fourth cup of black coffee, and started running my proprietary algorithms to sift through the digital garbage. Row after row of failed strip malls, bankrupt logistics companies, and defaulted residential mortgages scrolled endlessly across my dual monitors. Then, my eyes locked onto a specific line item. My hand froze, hovering over the mouse. My heart actually stopped beating for a full, terrifying second. There, listed under the primary collateral schedule for a massive commercial residential hybrid loan, was a name etched into my very soul: Oakwood Reach. Oakwood Reach was not just a piece of property. It was the historic 50-acre farm and stone manor built by my paternal grandparents. It was the only place in my entire childhood where I had ever felt truly safe and valued. While Chloe and my parents obsessed over elite country clubs and socialite galas, I spent my teenage summers there, tending to the horses, fixing the wooden fences, and learning the value of hard work from my grandfather. Before he passed away, he held my hand and promised that one day, Oakwood Reach would be mine to manage, because I was the only one in the family who actually respected the dirt it was built upon. Seeing it listed on a distressed asset ledger of a failing bank was a physical blow to my chest. I immediately isolated the file, locked the heavy glass door to my office, and dove straight into the forensic financial data. I needed to know exactly how my grandparents' pristine, debt-free legacy ended up in the toxic waste bin of the financial sector. My fingers flew across the keyboard, tracing the digital breadcrumbs of the money trail. Because of my intense training, it took me less than 45 minutes to unearth the absolute, sickening truth. 2 years ago, right around the exact time I was fighting for my life in a hospital bed and begging them for a temporary lifeline, my parents had quietly gone to this regional bank. They had leveraged the entire equity of Oakwood Reach, executing a massive, high-interest cash-out refinance mortgage. They completely drained the historical estate of its financial lifeblood. And where did that massive injection of cash go? I followed the wire transfers perfectly. The funds were funneled directly into a legal escrow account. It was the exact same escrow account used to purchase Chloe's $500,000 suburban villa outright. The puzzle pieces snapped together with terrifying, blinding clarity. They had not saved up for that generous wedding gift. They had secretly mortgaged the only real piece of heritage our family possessed to buy a shiny, $500,000 toy for their golden child. They had sacrificed my promised inheritance to fund Chloe's vanity, all while using the leftover cash flow to fund their lavish networking parties and maintain their fake high society facade on social media. But the encrypted file contained an even more pathetic revelation. I pulled up the payment history and realized my parents were completely broke. The documents showed that they had missed their first mortgage payment, then they missed the second, then the third. As I scrolled down the ledger, the red flags multiplied exponentially. They were currently 6 months in arrears. They had blown through all their liquid cash, and the regional bank had officially flagged the account for severe delinquency. In the attached legal correspondence folder, I found the final nail in the coffin. The bank was actively drafting the foreclosure notices. Within a matter of weeks, Oakwood Reach was going to be legally seized, auctioned off to the highest bidder on the courthouse steps, and likely bulldozed by some corporate developer. The lingering pain of their rejection at that steakhouse evaporated entirely, replaced in an instant by an icy, absolute fury. They had not just thrown me away. They had actively sold out the blood, sweat, and history of our ancestors just to finance their own arrogance. Any normal person might have picked up the phone. A normal daughter might have called to scream, to demand answers, or to desperately warn them about the impending foreclosure. But I was no longer a normal daughter. Meridian Frost Capital had forged me into a financial weapon, and I was about to use every single ruthless tactic I had learned. I leaned back in my ergonomic leather chair, staring at the glowing monitors in the dark office, and smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator that had finally cornered its prey. I decided right then and there that I would not utter a single word of warning to Arthur, Eleanor, or Chloe. They were going to lose everything, but they were not going to lose it to a random regional bank. They were going to lose it to me. I grabbed my yellow legal pad, uncapped my pen, and began drafting the most flawless, brutal corporate takeover strategy of my entire career. At exactly 7 o'clock on Monday morning, I bypassed my own desk and walked directly into the corner glass office of the managing partner at Meridian Frost Capital. He was a ruthless corporate veteran who respected nothing but profit margins and calculated aggression, without waiting for an invitation to sit. I dropped a perfectly bound, 200-page acquisition strategy directly onto his mahogany desk. I want to buy the entire distressed portfolio from the failing regional bank, I stated, my voice steady and completely devoid of hesitation. And I want to acquire it at a 40% discount. My boss leaned back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers as he looked over the executive summary. He knew the regional bank was desperate, but taking on their entire toxic debt package was a massive gamble, even for a firm like ours. He looked up at me, his eyes narrowing with a mixture of skepticism and intense curiosity. "This is a massive exposure," he replied smoothly. "There is a lot of garbage in these files. Why are you bringing me a suicide mission?" "Because the underlying collateral is solid if we know how to extract it," I countered, leaning forward and placing both hands flat on his desk. "But I am not just bringing this to the firm. I want a carve-out. There is one specific high-yield commercial residential hybrid loan in this package. I want 100% personal ownership of that specific debt assigned to my private entity, Ironclad Holdings, LLC. He raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued by my blatant audacity. "You want to cherry-pick the best asset for yourself using the firm's acquisition infrastructure. What exactly are you offering to collateralize this personal venture?" "Everything," I said without blinking. "I am pledging my entire life savings, every single dollar of liquid cash I have stockpiled over the last 2 years. Furthermore, I am putting up my future employment contract. I will sign over my next 3 years of corporate bonuses and my equity shares in Meridian Frost. If my private fund fails to collect on this debt, you get to own me for free. I take all the personal risk, and the firm still makes a killing on the rest of the discounted portfolio." The room went completely silent. He stared at me, trying to find a single trace of bluffing in my posture. He found absolutely none. I was offering a masterclass in financial leverage, betting my entire existence on a single hand of corporate poker. Slowly, a predatory smile spread across his face. He was deeply impressed by the cold-blooded, psychopathic level of calculation I was displaying. To him, I was the ultimate capitalist soldier. "Draw up the transfer agreements," he ordered, tossing the file back toward me. "The firm takes the portfolio. Ironclad Holdings takes your specific target." Within 48 hours, the legal paperwork was completely finalized. The transaction was buried under layers of corporate jargon and non-disclosure agreements. On paper, a faceless, offshore-registered private equity fund named Ironclad Holdings, LLC, was now the supreme, absolute creditor of Arthur and Eleanor Lynch. I legally owned the financial chain around their necks, and they were completely oblivious, because my name was strictly hidden behind the corporate veil. They had no idea that the monster they were about to face was the daughter they had thrown away like trash. While I was orchestrating this flawless financial coup, my former family was experiencing a rapid, catastrophic reality check. Chloe had recently launched a boutique fashion startup, heavily funded by whatever remaining cash our parents could scrape together. Predictably, it was an absolute disaster. Chloe spent wildly on aesthetics, throwing lavish launch parties, renting premium retail space in the city center, and hiring expensive social media influencers. She completely ignored inventory management, revenue models, and basic accounting. With zero actual sales to support the massive overhead, the startup hemorrhaged money and filed for bankruptcy protection in less than 8 months. The timing could not have been more poetic. Just as the Lynch family realized they had zero income and their bank accounts were completely dry, the legal hammer of Ironclad Holdings, LLC, finally dropped. I did not send them a polite warning. I utilized the most aggressive corporate law firm in Seattle to serve them. On a crisp Tuesday morning, heavily armed process servers arrived at the gates of Oakwood Reach and the front door of Chloe's $500,000 villa. They handed over thick, intimidating stacks of legal documents. There were formal notices of default, aggressive court subpoenas, and immediate threats of foreclosure. Sitting in my high-rise office, I monitored the situation through my legal team. I could practically smell the sheer panic radiating from my parents. They were receiving demand letters written in the coldest, most unforgiving legal language possible, demanding immediate repayment of the entire loan balance plus exorbitant late fees and penalties. They tried to call their old contacts at the regional bank to beg for an extension, only to be coldly informed that their debt had been sold off to a mysterious, aggressive investment fund that did not negotiate. The arrogant empire they had built on my stolen inheritance was finally catching fire, and I was holding the only bucket of water. Several agonizing months dragged on, and the sheer weight of the financial siege completely crushed the Lynch family. The descent into poverty is rarely a sudden drop. It is a slow, humiliating erosion of dignity, and I watched every agonizing second of it unfold through the detailed legal reports filed by my attorneys. The grand $500,000 villa, once the sparkling crown jewel of Chloe's social media empire, became a dark, freezing tomb. Without cash to pay the basic utility bills, the city shut off the electricity and the water supply. The pristine infinity pool turned into a stagnant, algae-filled swamp. At the exact same time, Arthur and Eleanor faced their own brutal social execution. After missing 6 consecutive months of premium membership dues, their elite country club publicly revoked their access. They were turned away at the wrought iron front gates by security guards. Humiliated in front of the very high society friends they had so desperately tried to impress for decades. Before they came to me, they had tried absolutely everything to survive. Arthur had spent weeks calling in every single favor he believed he was owed by his wealthy associates. He attended charity galas he could no longer afford, cornering old friends near the open bars, begging for temporary bridge loans. Every single one of them turned him away. High society is a brutally efficient ecosystem, and the moment they smelled financial blood in the water, the Lynch family was actively shunned. Their credit cards were maxed out and frozen. They were financially, socially, and emotionally bankrupt. Desperation eventually breeds profound delusion. Through the gossip of a distant cousin, Arthur and Eleanor caught wind of a vague rumor. They heard that the daughter they had discarded was now holding a senior, highly influential position at Meridian Frost Capital. They did not know the actual details. They certainly did not know about the existence of Ironclad Holdings. In their desperate minds, Meridian Frost was simply the aggressive corporate firm handling the debt collection for whatever faceless fund was hunting them, and I was merely a successful employee who had the ear of the top executives. So, they swallowed whatever microscopic fragments of pride they had left. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, The receptionist on the executive floor buzzed my intercom to announce that I had unexpected visitors claiming to be immediate family. I pulled up the lobby security feed on my monitor. There they were, my parents and my sister, standing awkwardly in the sleek, minimalist marble lobby of our corporate headquarters. They had clearly sold their luxury vehicles to make ends meet, having arrived in a battered, dented domestic sedan that looked entirely out of place in our executive parking garage. I instructed security to send them up to my floor. The heavy glass doors to my massive corner office swung open. The space I commanded was a testament to cold, hard corporate power, featuring panoramic views of the Seattle skyline, custom mahogany furniture, and original abstract art. The three of them stepped inside, their eyes darting nervously around the room, taking in the sheer magnitude of my success. The physical transformation in them was incredibly jarring. Chloe looked haggard, her designer clothes wrinkled and completely out of season, the arrogant spark in her eyes entirely extinguished. Eleanor had heavy dark circles under her eyes, and Arthur looked like he had aged a full decade, his posture slumped and thoroughly defeated. Instantly, the pathetic theater production began. Eleanor burst into theatrical, heavy tears, rushing forward with her arms wide open, trying to embrace the daughter she had completely ignored for years. I simply held up a single, flat hand, signaling her to stop before she even crossed the center of the Persian rug. She froze in her tracks, awkwardly lowering her arms, but continued to sob loudly into a crumpled tissue. "Ruth, my sweet girl," Eleanor wailed, her voice trembling with manufactured affection. "We have missed you so much. You have no idea how hard it has been for us to find you." "We are in terrible trouble, Ruth," Arthur interjected, stepping forward to take charge. He tried to muster his old patriarchal authority, though his voice cracked under the immense strain. "A ruthless investment fund is trying to take everything from us. They are coming after the estate. They are trying to throw your sister out of her home. We just found out that your firm is managing the collection process. We know you are a high-level executive here now. We know you have real power." Chloe stepped up next to him, tears streaming down her face, entirely stripping away the mocking smirk she had worn at that steakhouse years ago. "Please, Ruth, they cut off my power. I am sleeping in a freezing house. You have to talk to your boss. You have to explain to them that this is a giant misunderstanding. Beg them to restructure the debt, or cancel the late fees, or just give us a little more time. You can do that for us, right?" They stood there, a trio of well-dressed beggars, fully expecting me to leverage my hard-earned career to save them from the brutal consequences of their own toxic greed. I sat perfectly still, resting my back against the tailored leather of my executive chair. I did not offer them a seat. I did not offer them a glass of water. I simply watched them with the clinical detachment of a scientist observing insects trapped in a glass jar. Sensing my absolute silence, Arthur decided to play what he foolishly believed was his absolute trump card. He puffed out his chest, attempting to look magnanimous, and delivered a line so breathtakingly arrogant it almost made me laugh out loud. "Listen to me," Arthur said, trying to sound firm and fatherly. "We know we have had our differences in the past, but family is family. If you go to your superiors right now, if you use your influence to help us keep Chloe's villa and the farm, I will officially recognize you as a valuable member of this family. We can put the past behind us." I let his ridiculous words hang in the freezing, air-conditioned atmosphere of the office. I took a slow, deliberate breath, my face remaining an absolute mask of carved stone. I was completely unbothered, silently and thoroughly savoring the exquisite, intoxicating flavor of this miserable, pathetic display. I raised my hand, cutting off the pathetic symphony of their whining. I did not say a single word at first. Instead, I slowly opened the bottom drawer of my mahogany desk and pulled out a thick, heavy legal binder. It was stamped with the glaring red seal of the County Supreme Court. I tossed it onto the polished wood between us. It landed with a heavy final thud that made all three of them physically jump. "There is no boss," I stated, my voice dropping to a freezing, deadpan whisper. You are completely mistaken about how the financial hierarchy of this firm operates. I do not answer to anyone regarding your specific debt. I am not an employee asking for a favor." Arthur stared at me, his brow furrowing in deep confusion. "What are you talking about? Meridian Frost is managing the collection for Ironclad Holdings." "Meridian Frost acquired the bank's entire distressed portfolio," I clarified, leaning forward and resting my forearms on the desk. "But I carved your specific loan out of the package. I put up my entire life savings and my future corporate earnings to buy it personally. Ironclad Holdings, LC, is not a faceless offshore corporate entity. Ironclad Holdings is me. I am your absolute, undisputed creditor. I own the financial chains around your necks, and I legally own every single thing you currently possess." The color drained from Arthur's face so fast he looked like a corpse. Eleanor let out a sharp, choked gasp, stumbling backward until she hit the edge of the leather sofa. Chloe just stood there, her mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish, unable to process the magnitude of what I had just said. When the shock finally wore off, Arthur's manufactured fatherly facade violently shattered. His face turned deep crimson, and the veins in his neck bulged. He slammed his fists onto my desk, his eyes wide with unhinged fury. "You cold-blooded, ungrateful monster!" he screamed, his voice cracking with desperation. "We are your blood. You intentionally plotted to steal Oakwood Reach from us. You deliberately let us go bankrupt just so you could swoop in and steal the family estate." "I did not steal anything," I replied, my voice completely unshaken by his tantrum. "You sold it. You secretly bled the equity dry from the only heritage our family had left to buy a shiny toy for your golden child. I simply bought the wreckage you left behind. But you are missing the most important detail. Arthur, you are severely underestimating the scope of my ownership." I opened the binder and flipped to the primary collateral agreement, tapping my index finger on a specific, highlighted paragraph. "Did you even read the paperwork when you signed that high-interest refinance mortgage?" I asked, tilting my head. "Or were you too busy uncorking champagne? Your loan was strictly cross-collateralized, because you used the historic equity of the farm to directly fund the cash purchase of the villa. The assets are legally bound together under the default clause. When you failed to make your payments for 6 consecutive months, the breach triggered a total asset forfeiture." I paused, making sure they hung on to every single word. "That means I do not just get Oakwood Reach. The foreclosure process grants me total, unencumbered ownership of Chloe's $500,000 villa as well. It is mine." The absolute devastation that washed over them was intoxicating. Chloe let out a guttural, agonizing wail and collapsed onto the Persian rug. She fell to her knees, clutching the edge of my desk, her expensive makeup running down her face in dark, ugly streaks. "No, please, Ruth, no," she sobbed hysterically. "You cannot take my house. It is my home. You cannot throw me out onto the street. Please, I am begging you." Eleanor buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking violently as she wept with genuine, bitter regret. But their tears meant absolutely nothing to me now. They were years too late. I reached into my pen holder, pulled out my heavy silver fountain pen, and uncapped it. I slid a single sheet of paper from the back of the binder. It was the formal, court-approved eviction notice. Without a single ounce of hesitation, I signed my name at the bottom in bold, sweeping strokes right in front of their faces. "You have exactly 72 hours to vacate the villa," I declared, sliding the notice across the desk toward Arthur. "If you are not entirely off the premises by Friday morning, I will have the county sheriff physically remove you and your belongings." Arthur stared at the eviction notice, his spirit entirely broken. He looked like a hollow shell of the arrogant man who had dismissed me at that steakhouse. "However," I added, my voice dripping with calculated sarcasm, "I am not completely heartless. I do have a massive, historic estate that requires a lot of manual upkeep. If you three do not want to sleep under a bridge, I am willing to offer you a grace period. You can move into the old, drafty tenant shack behind the stables at Oakwood Reach. I need gardeners and someone to muck out the horse stalls. I will pay you minimum wage, and you will pay me a standard monthly rent. If you work hard 70 hours a week, you might just be able to survive." They did not argue. They did not scream anymore. They were completely and utterly defeated. I pressed the intercom button and calmly asked corporate security to escort my guests out of the building. I sat back and watched as two large men in dark suits guided the weeping, stumbling remnants of the Lynch family out of my office, the heavy glass doors clicking shut behind them, sealing my victory. That evening, I drove my black SUV out to the countryside. I pulled through the familiar wrought iron gates of Oakwood Reach and parked in the long gravel driveway. The massive stone manor stood silently in the twilight, exactly as I remembered it from my childhood. I stepped out of the car, breathing in the crisp, clean air of the estate that now belonged entirely to me. I stood on the massive front porch, looking out over the rolling green acres, and smiled. A deep, profound sense of peace settled over me. I had taken the brutal label of being completely worthless and forged it into an absolute, untouchable power. I had finally come home, and I was exactly what I was meant to be. Thank you so much to everyone for listening to my story today. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please let me know your city or country in the comments below. If you enjoyed today's story and found it satisfying, please consider helping our channel out. With YouTube demonetizing us, we are struggling to keep the lights on. A donation of just $1 makes a massive difference. It helps pay our incredible staff, allows them to feed their families, and ensures we can keep creating these amazing stories for you. You can support us by scanning the QR code on your screen, or by clicking the donation link in the description or the pinned comment. Thank you again from the bottom of my heart, and I will see you in the next video.